Greetings! This is Chris Ruby with another installment of the short stories by Isaac Asimov. The next one in the sequence of his stories was, of course, the Foundation segment that comes to be known as Now You See It. It should be followed by another one that says, And Now You Don't, but that comes quite a bit later, and a few more stories in between that are neither Foundation nor Robot, interestingly enough. But at least at this particular one, released actually late 1947 on the January 1948 issue of Astounding Science Fiction. So, and as you can see, he's got the cover. Now you see it right there on the cover. Isaac Asimov. This is a scene from the little cold, not so pleasant planet of Rossum, a minor planet of the kingdom of Tazenda. This is the one where the Mule is looking for the second Foundation. And all you can do is go scouring the far reaches of the opposite edge of the galaxy in search of the second Foundation. So this is a novelette. Now You See It by Isaac Asimov. Okay, so page 7. So let's start with a few little quick things that you get here. One is a little blurb. And the blurb reads, The Mule had to find that second Foundation, and because of his power, the second Foundation couldn't let him. But because he ruled most of the galaxy and had certain special powers, the Mule wasn't easily stopped. So it's illustrated by Roger, so let's take a look at that. There's one very abstract, this weird sort of crystal skull sort of look with like little bits of lightning shooting off in all directions, interfering with the planets. It says the second Foundation. So what else do we have in here in the second Foundation? A very nice portrait of Mule. He still has his appearance with the long nose, but somehow here there's something in his look and manner that seems appropriate to an emperor rather than a clown. So that's kind of interesting. Then there's this is Mule. Obviously, you can just see from his pose that he's the one in charge, and the other man in uniform is reporting to him, and that would be, probably Hand Pritcher. Could be Bale Chanis, though. Bale Chanis, I never pictured him being uniformed as I read the story, but the pictures here always show him uniformed. This is written, remember, in 1947, when a lot of people either had been and often still were in uniform from World War II. So wearing uniform was fairly common and reasonable. See, here's another portrait. This specifically says Chanis. And there he is. It's obviously a uniform hat and a military braid. So there it is, a figure. Okay. Unless the artist made a mistake and just assumed that, and that Hand Pritcher certainly had been, had military rank. Here's a very key climax scene, and this is, you can see, okay, Hand Pritcher, so that does seem, has his gun pointed at the other, and that's Bale Chanis. Well, he's got his shirt off, so it's hard to tell. There might have been some military braid on there. But anyway, the two are at odds with each other, and off to the side here, right there, is the Mule, warmly dressed because he's kind of got a thin, spindly frame, entering in the door. I've got an old-fashioned incandescent light bulb with a tungsten filament in there. You can just tell. Very rustic for a remote future. I like that. And then finally, guess he flies off. This could be just a generic artwork. So, Dale Chanis. Because what happens here, a rather interesting story happened with that, and that is that Isaac Asimov, sick to death of writing Foundation stories, wanted to end it right there. And apparently he had intended that the second Foundation would be located in that area, whether on Tazenda itself, or on Rossum, or some other world somewhere within the about 27 world kingdom of Tazenda at that far reach of the galaxy. And there's even some hints of this, which carried over into the story as published. And I think just little glimpses from the interludes really say a lot here. Okay, let's see here. Well, okay, I'll have some notes here. We'll read through from the notes. Okay, now the first one was the first interlude, which, by the way, there's some textual changes here. This is the one. The first interlude. They say they're talking among themselves. They say, look at that! In 6 months, he's gone from having taken over Terminus. So, okay, I'm finding this. Okay. Shortly after he first achieved galactic eminence with the conquest of the first Foundation, half a year after, to be exact, he was on Trantor. Okay. Within another half year, he would have been here. No. So picture that for a moment. Here's the galaxy. He conquered Terminus on one side. 6 months later, he was halfway across in the middle of the galaxy where Trantor is. Another 6 months. So you can see the implication of that. Obviously, they were still picturing it being that way. In the second interlude, there's another tiny reference that again kind of sounds like the Mule. Well, he's on his way. Given the actual final place for the second Foundation, it's a little more than that, I should say, but I won't drill into that further. But they'd say, oh, it's risky, it's very risky. Well, I guess the idea is it's very risky if you are actually trying to bring the Mule to the world of the second Foundation. That would be super risky. What if the Mule, what if things didn't handle right? Okay. And then in the third interlude, there's a little part where the first speaker looks up and he sees faint star gleams, which makes sense if you're way at the edge of the galaxy, like Terminus or where supposed stars in as originally pictured would have been. If you're where Trantor is, you're close to the middle of the galaxy, and the whole sky is star-studded. Stars. The night is probably almost as bright as the day from just so many stars, so big, so numerous, so close. Not faint star gleams. So, and by the way, there's a few minor alterations to get into between as originally published versus how it appeared in the book as searched by the Mule, the first major section within the second Foundation, about the first 1/3 of the book. So, what we're looking for here is, well, it changed. Well, there's a whole major prologue that got added for the book. I'm not going to quote it here because it's a good summary, though, of the first 2 volumes, and then even kind of gives a little hint of where the 3rd volume is going. So it's actually a very good prologue. And between that one and the prologue in the 2nd volume, I gradually managed to figure out for myself that second Foundation is actually the 3rd volume, and foundation and empire is really the second. See, people get those two mixed up sometimes, and if they read them in the wrong order, that just sucks the bottom right out of it. Now, there is a really neat little thing at the beginning, a little quote from the Essays on History by Liger and Veer. It starts with, after the definite breakup of the First Galactic Empire, it was the combination of worlds under the personal rule of that strange personality known to his times as the Mule that first presents history with a unified volume of space, truly imperial in scope. The earlier commercial empire of the Foundation had been diverse and loosely knit, despite the impalpable backing of the predictions of psychohistory. It was not to be compared with the tightly controlled union of worlds under the Mule, comprising, as it did, 1/10 the volume of the galaxy and 1/15 of its population. So that is replaced with the Encyclopedia Galactica quote. The Mule, it was after the fall of the First Foundation that the constructive aspects of the Mule's regime took place. After the definite breakup of the First Galactic Empire, it was he who first presented history with a unified volume of space, truly imperial in scope. The earlier commercial empire at the fallen Foundation had been diverse and loosely knit, despite the impalpable backing of the predictions of psychohistory. It was not to be compared with the tightly controlled union of worlds under the Mule, comprising as it did 1/10. That part's the same. Okay. So there's a couple mentions of either that article or he is writing with Veer with Encyclopedia Galactica article. And so he is mildly astonished over the colossal haste of the writer, Veer, with simply the writer of the article Encyclopedia Galactica. So we're going to abandon Veer or abandon the Encyclopedia. One other very significant change was that apparently, as originally published, Selden was from Santani. Interesting. Earlier he was from Siwena, now he's from Santani. And then in the book, now he's from Helicon. So that keeps changing around. One other place where a word gets changed from unreliable to unreachable, go figure. And that is all the textual differences between the two. Well, like I said, there's a whole prologue in the book that simply didn't exist in the article. I read the publisher Squibs, so that completes all the difference. So, as a story, you've got these two great powers about to encounter each other, and each kind of having to really kind of pussyfoot around the other. So it's kind of like two fighters in the ring, kind of unfamiliar with each other, so they're kind of wanting to get at each other, but also kind of afraid of each other. They're moving around inside the boxing ring. Just kind of where are we going to meet? And off they go to the boxing match, as it were. And it's kind of that way. One other small change is that the interludes. If you look in the book, there are 6 sections to the story. The 5th of them does not have an interlude. First 4 have interludes. First interlude, second interlude, third interlude, fourth interlude. The 5th doesn't have one because I guess everything all comes together. The second foundation and the Mule finally meet. And then at the end there's a last interlude. As originally published, there's 5 sections because what's counted as 5 and 6 in the book are just one very long section with one single interlude, that is the last interlude. But it also just says interlude, not this number, interlude, all the way through. So at the end of the first section, there's just says interlude. Second just says interlude. Third, fourth, like that. And this 5th, very long, and it just has interlude. Where Baal Chanis wakes up and discovers that all his knowledge has been restored to him, and now he knows where the second foundation really is, and not where he's been led to believe. So, and with him apparently the readers of the story. So, it's kind of a delaying tactic more than anything else, and generally not considered one of the stronger foundation segments. But it is kind of the beginning of people trying to figure out, so where the heck is it? So we explore Kazenda, and then we explore Rossum. Oh, one more thing about Rossum. Think of Karl Kopek's original robot story, Rossum's Robots, or something like that. I think that's kind of surprising. Rossum, what is it called? Now that's what we get. This. Carl Coppett, Rossum's Universal Robots. Yeah. Rossum, I don't know. Is there a hint of something, some crude tie-in between the Second Foundation and robots implied here? An interesting and intriguing thought. Unfortunately, it never gets developed until much later when robots do enter in a whole different capacity, having nothing to do with the name of the small world in the neighborhood, which is Enda. Anyway, that's what I have for the Now You See It installment of Story by Asimov, and that installment of the Foundation, which became Searched by the Mule. Thank you very much for listening.